The crimson sunset blazed across the horizon as Sophia Valenti pressed her heels into her mare's flanks, urging the exhausted animal forward. 3 days on the run had left both horse and rider coated in the fine dust of the Texas plains, but freedom tasted sweeter than any water could. Behind her, the sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder, confirming her worst fear they were gaining on her. It was May of 1875, and Sophia had escaped the clutches of Elias Thornton, Pecos's most powerful businessman, a man who believed he owned not just the town's bank and mercantile, but its people as well, especially her. "Keep going, girl," she whispered to her mare, her throat parched from the dry Texas air. At 22, Sophia had already endured more hardship than most faced in a lifetime. Orphaned at 16, she'd worked as a seamstress in Thornton's household, only to become the object of his unwanted attentions after his wife's passing. When he'd announced their impending marriage the previous week, not asking, but telling her she knew she had to flee. The open plains stretched before her, promising a future she could barely imagine. Her destination was uncertain, but anywhere was better than returning to Pecos and becoming Mrs. Thornton. The small bundle of possessions tied to her saddle represented everything she owned in the world, including the money she'd saved over 6 years of service. The hoofbeats grew louder. Sophia risked a glance over her shoulder, and her heart sank. 5 riders, dust billowing behind them, were closing the distance. She recognized Sheriff Jenkins at the lead and 2 of Thornton's men flanking him. It seemed Elias had convinced the law that she was a thief. Just as she'd feared, her mare was struggling now, foam gathering at the bit. They'd been riding too long without proper rest, but stopping meant capture. Ahead, the terrain changed, giving way to rockier ground with scattered mesquite and oak. If she could reach that uneven terrain, perhaps she could lose her pursuers. "Just a little further," she encouraged the horse, though her voice trembled with the knowledge that they might not make it. As the terrain grew more rugged, Sophia guided her mare into a narrow path that cut between 2 rocky outcroppings. The path dipped suddenly, leading into a small valley dotted with scrub oak and prickly pear cactus. Her heart leaped with hope. If she could navigate this area quickly enough, she might gain some advantage, but as she rounded a bend in the path, her mare reared suddenly. Sophia clutched the reins, barely maintaining her seat as the horse whinnied in fright. Blocking the path before them was a lone rider on a powerful black stallion. The stranger sat tall in his saddle, the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat obscuring his features. His duster was coated with the same dust that covered Sophia, but even from a distance, she could see the gleam of a rifle resting across his lap. "Whoa there," he called out, his voice deep and steady. "That's quite a pace you're setting." Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. Another obstacle. Another man standing between her and freedom. Behind her, the sounds of her pursuers grew louder. They'd spotted her trail and were following it down into the valley. "Please," she gasped, struggling to control her frightened horse. "Let me pass, they're after me." The stranger tilted his head slightly, seeming to assess her disheveled appearance, the fear in her eyes. Then his gaze shifted to the approaching riders cresting the hill behind her. "Who's chasing you?" he asked, his tone unchanged but his posture straightening in the saddle. "Men from Pecos. They want to take me back, but I won't go back there." Desperation made her voice crack. The stranger's hand tightened on the reins of his stallion as Sheriff Jenkins and his posse rounded the bend, pulling up short at the sight of the man blocking their path. "That's far enough," the stranger called out, shifting his rifle to a more visible position across his lap. Sheriff Jenkins, a corpulent man whose badge strained against his vest, raised his hand to halt his companions. "This don't concern you, mister. We're bringing back a thief who stole from her employer." The stranger's gaze flicked to Sophia, then back to Jenkins. "That's so." He studied the sheriff and his companions with a measuring look. "Seems like a lot of men to chase down one woman." "Mr. Thornton wants his property returned," Jenkins insisted. "And the girl who took it." Sophia felt her cheeks flame with indignation despite her fear. "I stole nothing. The money is mine, earned with my own hands." The stranger nodded almost imperceptibly. Something in his posture changed, a subtle shift from observer to participant. He nudged his stallion forward, positioning himself more firmly between Sophia and her pursuers. "Well now, there seems to be a misunderstanding," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "You see, this lady isn't going anywhere with you," Jenkins scowled. "By what right do you interfere with the law, stranger?" The man's hand moved to rest near his holstered revolver. "By the right of a husband protecting his wife." His declaration hung in the air for a moment before he continued. "She's my wife now, and where she goes, I go." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. A lie, a bold, unexpected lie from a man she'd never laid eyes on before this moment, but a lie that might save her. The sheriff's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Your wife. This here is Sophia Valenti, a seamstress from Pico's who works for Elias Thornton. She ain't married to nobody." "The name's Owen Reynolds," the stranger replied, tipping his hat back to reveal his face fully for the first time. Sophia found herself looking at a man perhaps in his early 30s, with sun-weathered skin, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. "And we were married 2 days ago in Sweetwater by the traveling preacher. Ain't that right, darling?" His gaze locked with Sophia's, communicating a clear message: play along. Sophia straightened in her saddle, summoning what dignity she could. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm Mrs. Reynolds now. I sent word to Mr. Thornton that I was leaving his employ to marry." One of Thornton's men spat on the ground. "That's a damn lie. Thornton got no such message, and he says you ran off with money from his safe." Owen's expression hardened. "I'd be careful throwing around accusations like that about my wife, friend." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Even from where Sophia sat, she could see the sheriff reassessing the situation. Jenkins wasn't a brave man, and the stranger before him radiated confidence and danger in equal measure. "If she's truly your wife," Jenkins said cautiously, "where are you headed?" "Our ranch," Owen replied without hesitation. 10 miles west of here. Been working it alone for too long. Now I've got a wife to help make it a proper home." He reached his hand toward Sophia. "Come on over here, Mrs. Reynolds. No need to be afraid anymore." Sophia hesitated only briefly before urging her mare forward. She had no reason to trust this stranger, but her alternatives had narrowed to a single point. When she reached his side, Owen Reynolds' hand closed firmly around hers, strong and calloused from work, but surprisingly gentle. "Sheriff," Owen continued, "I understand you were just doing your job, but there's been a misunderstanding. My wife took only what belonged to her. If Mr. Thornton has concerns, he can take them up with me directly at our ranch." Jenkins glanced at his companions, clearly weighing his options. "Thornton won't like this. He was quite insistent on bringing her back." "I imagine he was," Owen said, a hint of steel beneath his mild tone, "but she's not his to claim." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring until Jenkins finally nodded. "We'll be letting Mr. Thornton know where to find you. If what you say is true, there'll be no trouble." "Fair enough," Owen agreed. "Good day, gentlemen." Sophia held her breath as the sheriff turned his horse, motioning for his men to follow. They retreated slowly up the path, with one of Thornton's men casting a dark look over his shoulder before disappearing over the ridge. When they were out of sight, Sophia exhaled shakily. "Thank you," she whispered, only now realizing she was still clutching Owen Reynolds' hand. He released her gently. "Don't thank me yet. They'll be back with Thornton leading them next time." His eyes assessed her critically. "Your mare's about done in. My place isn't far from here. It's true what I said about having a ranch. You can rest there while we figure out your next move." Sophia hesitated. Trading one man's control for another's wasn't her plan. "Why did you help me?" Owen's expression softened slightly. "Let's just say I know what it's like to run from something that feels like a cage." He adjusted his hat. "I'm offering you shelter, Miss Valenti, not making demands. You can leave whenever you choose, though I'd recommend waiting until that horse of yours has recovered." Something in his frank manner and the distance he maintained despite their supposed marriage convinced Sophia. She nodded. "Lead the way, Mr. Reynolds." "Owen," he corrected, guiding his stallion around. "If we're playing husband and wife, you ought to use my given name." "Sophia," she replied, following him as he set a more moderate pace down a trail she hadn't noticed. Well, Sophia, welcome to your temporary freedom, he said. Let's hope we can make it more permanent. As they rode side by side through the gathering dusk, Sophia found herself stealing glances at the man who had just inserted himself into her desperate flight. Tall and lean, with broad shoulders, and a way of sitting his horse that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle, Owen Reynolds was an enigma, and possibly her only chance at escaping Elias Thornton's clutches. The sun had nearly set when they crested a small rise, revealing a modest ranch nestled in a protected valley below. A sturdy cabin with a stone chimney stood near a barn and corral. Several horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and a small creek wound through the property, glinting in the fading light. "It's not much," Owen said, noting her gaze, "but it's mine, free and clear." "It's beautiful," Sophia replied honestly. After days on the run, the sight of safe shelter brought tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. They rode down to the cabin in companionable silence. When they reached the yard, Owen dismounted in one fluid motion and came to help her down. Sophia's legs nearly buckled as her feet touched the ground, stiff from days in the saddle. Owen's strong hand steadied her at the waist. "Easy now," he murmured. "Let's get you inside, I'll see to the horses." Too exhausted to protest, Sophia allowed herself to be guided to the cabin door. Inside, the single room was Spartan but neat. A cast-iron stove stood in one corner, a bed with a handmade quilt in another. A table with 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and shelves lined one wall, holding books, supplies, and cooking implements. "Make yourself comfortable," Owen said, gesturing toward a rocking chair near the stove. "I'll be back shortly." Left alone, Sophia sank gratefully into the chair, her mind whirling with the day's events. She had begun the morning as a woman fleeing a forced marriage, and now found herself pretending to be married to a stranger. The irony might have made her laugh if she weren't so bone-tired. Owen returned faster than she expected, carrying her small bundle of possessions and a bucket of fresh water. He set the water near the stove and placed her things on the table. "You look like you're about to fall over," he observed. "When did you last eat?" Sophia tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think. I've had water, but food's been scarce." Owen nodded, already moving to the shelves where he gathered ingredients. "I'll make something simple. There's a washing screen in that corner if you want to clean up. I'll step out while you change." True to his word, after setting water to heat on the stove, Owen excused himself from the cabin. Sophia gratefully used the opportunity to wash the worst of the dust from her face and hands, and change into her one clean dress from her bundle. It was wrinkled from being packed, but infinitely better than the travel-stained garments she'd been wearing. When Owen knocked and re-entered, he carried an armful of firewood. His eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of her transformed appearance, but he made no comment beyond. "You look better." "Food will help more." He prepared a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and biscuits left from his morning baking. The food wasn't fancy, but to Sophia's hunger-sharpened senses, it tasted better than any fine dining she could recall. They ate in relative silence, both too tired for extensive conversation. After they'd eaten, Owen cleared the dishes. "You take the bed," he said, pointing to the quilt-covered bed in the corner. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight." Sophia frowned. "I can't put you out of your own bed." "You're not putting me anywhere," he replied, his tone brooking no argument. "I've slept in that barn plenty of times. Besides, if Thornton's men come nosing around in the night, they'll expect to find you in the house and me keeping watch." The practicality of this argument silenced her objections. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything today, I don't know why you stepped in, but I'm grateful." Owen paused at the door, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow we'll need to decide what happens next." After he left, Sophia sat for a long moment in the empty cabin, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this place that was her temporary sanctuary. Eventually, fatigue overcame her weariness and she climbed into the bed, breathing in the scent of sun-dried cotton and a faint trace of whatever soap Owen Reynolds used. As sleep claimed her, Sophia's last conscious thought was that for the first time in days, she felt something like safe. Morning came with the crow of a distant rooster and the smell of coffee. Sophia opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before memory rushed back. She sat up to find Owen already moving quietly around the cabin, stoking the stove and preparing breakfast. "Morning," he said, noticing her stirring. "Hope I didn't wake you. Coffee's hot if you want some." Sophia pushed back the quilt and swung her legs over the edge of the bed, suddenly self-conscious about her rumpled appearance. "Thank you. Coffee sounds wonderful." He poured a cup and brought it to her, keeping a respectful distance. In the clear light of morning, Sophia could see him more clearly than the previous evening. Owen Reynolds was handsome in a rugged way, with a few strands of silver threading through his dark brown hair at the temples. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned, though his expression now was watchful. "How are you feeling?" he asked, returning to the stove where he was frying bacon. "Better," she admitted. "Though I'm still trying to make sense of yesterday." Owen nodded, flipping the bacon with practiced ease. "It was quite a day. Your mare's recovering nicely, by the way. She needed the rest more than anything." "That's good to hear." Sophia sipped her coffee, organizing her thoughts. "Mr. Reynolds, Owen," he corrected. "And you're Sophia. Let's at least keep that part simple." "Owen," she amended. "I need to understand why you helped me. Most men wouldn't involve themselves in a stranger's troubles." He was quiet for a moment, focusing on transferring the bacon to a plate before answering. "I saw a woman being hunted by 5 men, riding a horse near collapse. Whatever your story was, those weren't fair odds." "Is that all?" Sophia pressed. Owen set plates on the table and gestured for her to join him. As they sat, he met her gaze directly. "No," he admitted. "I recognized Jenkins and knew what kind of lawman he is, the kind who serves whoever has the most money or influence, and I've heard of Elias Thornton. His reputation reaches beyond Pico's." "What have you heard?" Sophia asked, curious despite herself. "That he builds his fortune on others' hardships, that his first wife died under circumstances some found questionable, that he considers himself above the law." Owen cut into his food. "When I heard them call you Thornton's property, I knew enough." Sophia nodded slowly. "Everything you've heard is true. After his wife died last year, he started looking at me differently. I was just a seamstress in his household, but suddenly he was finding reasons to be where I was working, touching my shoulder or hand when he spoke to me." Her appetite diminished at the memories, but she forced herself to eat, knowing she needed the strength. "Last week, he announced to his business associates that we would be married by month's end. He didn't ask me, he told me, as if I had no say in the matter." "So you ran," Owen concluded. "I had to. The money he claims I stole was my wages that I'd saved for 6 years. Every penny was mine." Her voice hardened with conviction. Owen nodded, seeming unsurprised. "Well, that explains why they were so determined. Thornton strikes me as a man who doesn't like to lose what he considers his." "Which brings us back to my question," Sophia said. "Why risk making an enemy of such a powerful man for a stranger?" A shadow passed across Owen's face. "Let's just say I understand what it means to have choices taken away." He pushed his plate aside, his expression serious. "But now we need to talk about what comes next. Thornton won't give up easily. By now he knows exactly where you are." "I should leave," Sophia said automatically. "I've put you in enough danger." "And go where?" Owen countered. "Your mare needs at least another day of rest before hard riding, and even then, where would you go?" "Thornton has connections throughout the territory. He'd find you eventually." "I could try to reach Denver," she suggested. "I have a distant cousin there." Owen leaned back in his chair, considering. "Denver's a long way, and you'd be traveling alone through rough country." "I'm not saying you couldn't make it, but the odds aren't good." "What do you suggest then?" Sophia asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "I won't go back to Pico's, and I won't hide here forever, putting you at risk." "There might be another way," Owen said slowly. "But it would require you to trust me more than you probably should, given we met just yesterday." Sophia regarded him warily. "What way?" "We make the lie true," he said simply. "Or at least legally true." "You mean, actually marry?" Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "That's your solution. I flee one unwanted marriage only to enter another." Owen remained seated, his calm a counterpoint to her agitation. "Hear me out before you decide." I'm proposing a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement, if you will. As my wife, you'd have legal protection that you don't have as a single woman. Thornton couldn't claim you without challenging me directly, which would be far more difficult than pursuing a lone woman. He gestured around the cabin. You'd have a home here for as long as you need one, your own space, your own work, I wouldn't expect. He paused, a faint flush coloring his cheekbones. Anything from you that you didn't freely choose to give. Sophia paced the small confines of the cabin, her mind racing. And what would you gain from this arrangement? Owen's lips quirked in a half-smile. I won't lie, having help around the ranch would be welcome. It's too much for one person to manage properly. But mostly, I'd gain the satisfaction of thwarting a man like Thornton who thinks he can own people. How do I know I can trust you? Sophia asked, though something in her was already beginning to consider his proposal. You don't, Owen admitted. But consider this, I could have taken advantage of your situation yesterday if that was my intention. Instead, I gave you my bed and slept in the barn. He stood, moving to the window to look out at his land. The marriage would be real on paper, but in private, it would be whatever we chose to make it. If, after a year or so, when Thornton has found some other interest, you wanted to leave, go to your cousin in Denver or elsewhere, I wouldn't stop you. We could even arrange an amicable divorce. It was madness to even consider it, Sophia knew, and yet the practicality of the solution was undeniable. As a married woman, her legal standing would change. Thornton would have no claim on her without directly challenging her husband. I need time to think, she said finally. Owen nodded. Of course, I have work to do in the fields today anyway. Take all the time you need. Before he left, he paused at the door. One more thing, Sophia. Whatever you decide, I give you my word that you're safe here. If marriage isn't your choice, we'll find another way to get you to safety. With that, he was gone, leaving Sophia alone with her tumultuous thoughts. The morning stretched into afternoon as Sophia considered her options, such as they were. She tidied the cabin partly from habit and partly to give her hands something to do while her mind worked. The more she examined the situation, the more Owen's proposal made practical sense. However unconventional it might be, from the window, she could see him working in the distance, mending a section of fence. There was something reassuring about his methodical movements, the way he approached the task with quiet competence. In the short time she had known him, Owen Reynolds had shown himself to be a man of his word, direct, honest, and respectful of her choices, even when he disagreed. As the sun began its westward slide, Sophia reached her decision. When Owen returned to the cabin, dusty and tired from his day's labor, she was waiting with a fresh pot of coffee and the remains of a rabbit stew she'd prepared from ingredients she found in his stores. His eyebrows rose at the sight of the meal. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to, she replied, gesturing for him to sit. It gave me something to do while I thought. Owen washed his hands in the basin by the door before joining her at the table. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Sophia finally spoke. I've considered your proposal, she began carefully. Before I give you my answer, I need to be absolutely clear about the terms. Owen set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. All right. If we marry, it would be a legal partnership only, at least to start, Sophia said, her cheeks warming at her own directness. I would help with the ranch work, cooking, and whatever else is needed. In return, I would have your protection and a home. Owen nodded. That's what I proposed. And if, after a sufficient time has passed and Thornton's interest has waned, I wish to leave. She continued. I would honor that wish, Owen finished for her, though I hope you'd find enough satisfaction here to consider staying. Sophia studied him, trying to discern any hidden motives in his frank gaze. Finding none, she took a deep breath. Then I accept your proposal, Mr. Reynolds. I will marry you. Something flickered across Owen's face, surprise perhaps, or relief. He extended his hand across the table. Then we have an agreement, Miss Valenti. Sophia placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses of hard work against her skin. We do. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect late spring day in the Texas Hill Country. Sophia stood before the small mirror in Owen's soon-to-be-there cabin, adjusting the collar of her blue dress. It was the best garment she owned, though far from a proper wedding gown. Her dark hair was arranged in a simple but elegant style, with a few wildflowers tucked into the pins. Owen had ridden out at first light to fetch the circuit preacher who, by fortunate timing, was visiting a neighboring ranch. They would be married by noon, he had promised, with the neighboring rancher and his wife as witnesses. The hasty ceremony was necessary. Owen was certain Thornton would make his move soon. As if conjured by her thoughts, the sound of approaching horses reached Sophia's ears. Too many horses for it to be Owen returning with the preacher. Her heart pounding, she moved to the window and peered out. 5 riders approached the cabin Sheriff Jenkins, 3 men she recognized as Thornton's employees, and at their center, Elias Thornton himself. The sight of his portly figure astride his expensive horse sent a chill through her. He had come himself, unwilling to leave her retrieval to his men. Sophia glanced around the cabin, looking for options. Owen had shown her where he kept a shotgun, but she had never fired such a weapon and doubted her ability to hold off 5 men. Running was impossible. Her mare was in the corral, unsaddled, and these men would overtake her in minutes. Taking a steadying breath, she decided her best option was to confront them directly. Stalling until Owen returned was her only hope. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and stepped onto the porch as the riders entered the yard. "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sheriff, this is unexpected." Thornton's florid face contorted with a smile that never reached his cold eyes. "Sophia, my dear, you've led us on quite a chase." "I sent word that I was leaving your employ," she replied, sticking to the story she and Owen had established. "There was no need for a chase." "No such message was received," Thornton said, his tone hardening. "And my safe was short precisely the amount you had been paid over your years of service. A strange coincidence." "That money was mine," Sophia insisted. "Every penny earned." Thornton dismounted, handing his reins to one of his men. "We can discuss the particulars back in Pico's." "Gather your things." Sophia stood her ground. "I'm not going anywhere with you. This is my home now." "Ah yes, this supposed marriage." Thornton's smile turned cruel. "Jenkins made inquiries. There is no record of a marriage between you and this Reynolds' character in Sweetwater or anywhere else." "The preacher is coming today," Sophia said, the truth lending conviction to her words. "We're to be married at noon." Thornton mounted the steps, forcing Sophia to back toward the door. "How convenient, but I'm afraid I can't allow that. You see, I've already announced our engagement in Pico's." "It would be most embarrassing to return without my bride-to-be." "I never agreed to marry you," Sophia said, revulsion rising in her throat as he drew nearer. "You owe me, my dear," Thornton hissed, his pleasant facade slipping. 6 years of room and board, clothing, protection." "Did you think such things came without cost?" "I worked for every bit of it," Sophia retorted. "I owe you nothing." Thornton seized her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You ungrateful, take your hands off my wife." The command cut through the tension like a whip crack. Owen stood at the edge of the yard, his rifle raised and pointed directly at Thornton. Behind him, an older man in clerical clothing sat nervously atop a mule, and a middle-aged couple on horseback watched with wide eyes. "Reynolds," Jenkins called out, his hand hovering near his pistol. "This doesn't need to get ugly. The girl isn't your wife and she's wanted for theft in Pico's." "She will be my wife in about 10 minutes, Owen replied, his aim unwavering. "As for theft, I believe Mr. Thornton knows that's a false accusation. Now I'll say it one more time, take your hands off her." Something in Owen's tone must have convinced Thornton of his seriousness, for he released Sophia's arm, though he didn't step back. "This woman is promised to me," he insisted. "I've invested years in her upbringing and education." "Sophia is her own woman," Owen said, moving closer, the rifle still trained on Thornton. "She chooses who she marries, not you." Thornton's face darkened with rage. "Do you know who I am, Reynolds? I own half of Pico's. One word from me, and you'll never sell another head of cattle in this territory." "Fortunately, I don't deal in cattle," Owen replied evenly. "And I don't much care who you are. What I do care about is that you're trespassing on my land and threatening the woman I intend to marry." His gaze shifted to Jenkins. "Sheriff, I suggest you remind your friend here about the laws regarding trespassing and assault." Jenkins looked uncomfortable. Now see here, Reynolds, the lady chose me, Owen interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. She said no to Thornton. That should be the end of it. This isn't over, Thornton spat, finally backing down the steps. No one makes a fool of Elias Thornton. You managed that all on your own, Owen replied. Now get off my land, all of you. For a moment, it seemed as though Thornton might order his men to attack, but the steady aim of Owen's rifle and the witnesses behind him apparently gave him pause. With a final venomous glare at Sophia, he remounted his horse. You'll regret this, girl, he called to her. And you, Reynolds, watch your back. Owen's expression remained impassive. Good day, gentlemen. The riders departed in a cloud of dust and muttered threats. Only when they were well away did Owen lower his rifle and hurry to Sophia's side. Are you all right? He asked, his eyes scanning her for injury. Yes, she assured him, though her arm ached where Thornton had gripped it. You arrived just in time. I'm sorry I left you alone, Owen said, genuine regret in his voice. I should have anticipated he'd move this quickly. You couldn't have known, Sophia said. Looking past him to their bewildered audience, she added, I believe we have a wedding to attend to. Owen's expression softened. Are you sure? After what just happened, I'd understand if you wanted to reconsider. Sophia shook her head firmly. I'm more certain than ever. Thornton won't give up, and I won't be safe until I'm legally your wife. The simple ceremony took place in front of the cabin, with the spring wildflowers as their only decoration. The preacher, once he recovered from the excitement of their arrival, performed the service with dignity. The neighboring rancher and his wife, the Hendersons, served as witnesses, their initial shock giving way to romantic delight at being part of what Mrs. Henderson insisted on calling a love match forged in adversity. Sophia repeated her vows in a clear voice, her eyes never leaving Owen's face. For his part, Owen spoke with quiet confidence, his hand steady as he slipped a simple gold band hastily purchased in town that morning onto her finger. By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher declared. You may kiss your bride. Sophia had not considered this part of the ceremony. She and Owen had discussed the practical aspects of their arrangement, but not this traditional conclusion. For a moment, they both hesitated. Then Owen leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her lips, brief, respectful, yet somehow conveying a promise of protection that moved Sophia more than she expected. When he drew back, his eyes held a warmth that made her breath catch. Congratulations, Mrs. Reynolds, he murmured. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, she replied, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in days. The Hendersons insisted they join them for a celebratory meal, and the afternoon passed pleasantly in their company. By the time they returned to the cabin, their cabin now the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. An awkward silence fell between them as Owen closed the door. The practical reality of their arrangement now faced them directly. I'll make up a bed for myself by the stove, Owen said, breaking the tension. You take the bed same as before. You don't have to sleep on the floor in your own home, Sophia protested. Our home now, he corrected gently. And yes, I do. I meant what I said about this being your choice, Sophia. I won't press you for anything you're not ready to give. The sincerity in his voice moved her. You're a good man, Owen Reynolds, she said softly. He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I try to be. Now it's been a long day. Get some rest. That night, as Sophia lay in the bed that was now legitimately hers to use, she listened to the sound of Owen's steady breathing from his makeshift bed near the stove. For the first time since fleeing Pico's, she allowed herself to believe that she might truly be free of Elias Thornton's shadow. Whatever came next, she was no longer alone in her fight. The days following their impromptu wedding settled into a rhythm neither of them had anticipated. Sophia quickly proved herself indispensable around the ranch, tackling household tasks with efficiency while learning the outdoor work as well. Owen found himself impressed by her willingness to try anything, from helping with the horses to assisting with repairs on the windmill. They developed a comfortable routine, sharing meals and conversation while maintaining the respectful boundaries Owen had promised. At night, he continued to sleep on a pallet near the stove, though Sophia increasingly felt guilty about the arrangement. A week after their wedding, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Owen mentioned casually, "I need to ride into town tomorrow for supplies. Would you like to come along?" Sophia hesitated, remembering Thornton's threats. "Is it safe?" "Cedar Springs is 30 miles from Pecos," Owen assured her. "Different county, different people. Thornton has less influence there." The prospect of seeing someplace new and, frankly, of wearing something other than the same few dresses she'd brought in her escape appealed to Sophia. "Yes, I'd like that. I need a few things myself if we can afford it." "We can," Owen said with a nod. "The ranch doesn't make me rich, but it provides enough. Besides, you've been working hard. You should have what you need." The next morning, they set out at dawn, with Owen driving a wagon rather than riding. The journey took most of the morning, giving them time to talk more than they usually did during their busy days at the ranch. "How did you come to own the ranch?" Sophia asked as they traveled through the rolling landscape. Owen was quiet for a moment before answering. "It was my brother's originally. Daniel and I planned to run it together after the war, but he didn't make it back from Gettysburg." "I'm sorry," Sophia said, understanding now the occasional sadness she glimpsed in Owen's eyes. He nodded his acknowledgement. "Daniel left it to me in his will. I was still in the army when I got word, served another year before coming home. Took me a while to make it profitable again. Land doesn't do well sitting untended." "You were in the war?" Sophia asked, curious about this man who was now her husband. "Union cavalry," Owen confirmed. "Enlisted in 62, served until 66. This explained his straight posture and the way he sometimes scanned the horizon with watchful eyes, habits formed in dangerous times. "Is that where you learned to handle a rifle so well?" A small smile touched his lips. "Actually, I learned that from my father. The army just refined the skill." They rode in companionable silence for a while before Sophia asked, "Do you have family elsewhere?" Owen shook his head. "My parents passed before the war. No siblings except Daniel." He glanced at her. "What about you? You mentioned a cousin in Denver. Third cousin, actually." "We've never met, but she wrote to my mother years ago." Sophia gazed at the landscape passing by. "My parents died when I was 16. Fever took them both within days of each other. With no family in Pecos, I took the position in Thornton's household. It seemed like Providence at the time." "And now?" Owen asked. Sophia considered this. "Now I think perhaps Providence had a different plan than I first believed. Cedar Springs proved to be a bustling small town, considerably more welcoming than Pecos." Owen was clearly known and respected there, greeted warmly by the shopkeepers and townsfolk they encountered. At the general store, Owen encouraged Sophia to select whatever she needed. "Get a few dresses," he suggested, noting her hesitation at the fabric display, "and anything else you require." The storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Winters, took Sophia under her wing, helping her select practical materials along with a few ready-made items. "Your husband's a good man," she confided as they examined calico prints. "Been trading here for years. Always honest, always fair." "Yes," Sophia agreed, finding she meant it. "He is a good man." When she had made her selections, including fabric for new curtains and a dress for everyday wear, Owen added his supplies to the order. As he settled the bill, Sophia wandered to the front of the store where a notice board displayed local announcements. One notice in particular caught her eye: a request for a teacher at the new schoolhouse, starting in September. Sophia had received a good education before her parents' deaths and had often helped teach the younger servants' children in Thornton's household. The idea of teaching appealed to her deeply. "Find something interesting?" Owen asked, joining her. Sophia pointed to the notice. "They need a teacher." Owen studied it, then glanced at her with raised eyebrows. "Is that something you'd want to do?" "I've always enjoyed teaching," she admitted, "but I don't know if it would be possible with my responsibilities at the ranch." "The school's only in session until 3, Owen noted. "And it's not far from our place. We could make it work if it's what you want." His easy acceptance of her interest with no dismissal or discouragement warmed Sophia's heart. "I'll think about it." They finished their shopping and enjoyed a meal at the local hotel before starting the journey home. As they traveled, Sophia found herself thinking about the future in a way she hadn't dared since fleeing Picos. "Thank you for today," she said as the ranch came into view in the late afternoon light. It was liberating to be somewhere I didn't have to look over my shoulder. Owen's expression softened. "You're welcome, and thank you for coming with me. It's nice to have company on these trips." That evening, as Sophia prepared for bed, she made a decision. "Owen," she called, stopping him as he arranged his bedroll near the stove. "This arrangement is ridiculous," he straightened, uncertain. "What do you mean? You're sleeping on the floor in your own home," she said firmly. "The bed is big enough for both of us. We're adults and we're legally married. There's no reason we can't share it while maintaining the boundaries we've agreed upon." Owen studied her face carefully. "Are you certain about this?" "I am," Sophia confirmed. "It's the practical solution, and I trust you to keep your word about expectations." After a moment's consideration, Owen nodded. "All right, if you're comfortable with it." That night, they lay side by side in the bed that had once been his alone, a respectful space between them. Sophia had worried it might be awkward, but there was something comforting about his solid presence beside her. She fell asleep more quickly than she had since arriving at the ranch. In the middle of the night, she woke briefly to find that she had unconsciously moved closer to him in her sleep, drawn to his warmth. Owen remained on his side, his breathing deep and even. In the moonlight filtering through the window, Sophia studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows even in sleep. A strange feeling stirred within her, something between gratitude and another emotion she wasn't ready to name. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself to drift back to sleep, more at peace than she had been in years. June gave way to July, bringing the full heat of the Texas summer. Owen and Sophia fell into an easy partnership, working side by side to maintain the ranch. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Owen whittled and Sophia sewed or read aloud from one of his books. At night, they shared the bed with an increasingly comfortable familiarity, though Owen maintained the respectful distance he had promised. Sometimes, Sophia found herself wondering what it would be like if that distance were breached, but she kept such thoughts to herself. One scorching afternoon, as they worked together repairing a section of fence damaged in a recent thunderstorm, Owen paused to wipe sweat from his brow. "Sophia," he began, his tone unusually hesitant, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." She looked up from where she was holding a post steady. "What is it? That teaching position in Cedar Springs, have you given it more thought?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I have. I think I'd like to apply if you truly believe we can manage it with the ranch work." A smile spread across Owen's face. "I do, and I think you'd be excellent at it." He hesitated again before continuing. "There's a school board meeting next week. We could ride into town and you could speak with them directly." "I'd like that," Sophia said, returning his smile. "Thank you for encouraging me. You don't need to thank me for supporting what you want," Owen replied, his voice suddenly gruff. "That's what husbands should do." Something in his tone made Sophia's heart beat faster. Over the weeks of their marriage, her feelings for Owen had evolved from cautious gratitude to genuine affection and respect. Lately, she found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, appreciating not just his kindness but his physical presence as well, the strength in his hands, the rare but transformative nature of his smile. Before she could examine these feelings further, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Owen straightened, instinctively moving to place himself between Sophia and the newcomers. Two riders appeared over the rise, men Sophia recognized with a jolt of fear as Thornton's employees, the same ones who had accompanied him to the ranch after her escape. "Stay behind me," Owen murmured, his hand moving to the pistol he wore while working. The men drew up several yards away, their posture tense but not immediately threatening. "Reynolds," the older of the two called, "got a message for you from Mr. Thornton." "Say your piece and be on your way," Owen replied, his voice cold. "Mr. Thornton says to tell you he hasn't forgotten about your interference." The man's gaze shifted to Sophia. "He also says to remind Mrs. Reynolds that debts always come due eventually." "I owe Thornton nothing," Sophia said, stepping forward despite Owen's protective stance. The second man smirked. That's not how he sees it. He's a patient man, Mr. Thornton, says he can wait for what's his. My wife isn't property, Owen said, his hand now resting openly on his pistol. And you're trespassing. Deliver your message to Thornton. If he or any of his men set foot on my land again, they won't leave under their own power. The men exchanged glances before the first nodded tersely. Message delivered then. Good day to you both. As they rode away, Sophia released a shaky breath. They're trying to frighten us. Yes, Owen agreed, watching until the riders disappeared from view. But Thornton's smart enough to know he can't simply take you by force without consequences. This is just intimidation. Will it stop? Sophia asked, voicing the fear that had lurked at the edges of her newfound happiness. Owen turned to her, his expression grave. Eventually, men like Thornton have short attention spans. When it comes to revenge, something new always captures their interest. He took her hand, a rare gesture that sent warmth through her despite the circumstances. In the meantime, we'll be cautious but not afraid. All right, Sophia nodded, drawing strength from his steadiness. All right. They returned to their work, but the visit had cast a shadow over the day. That evening, as they sat at the table for supper, Owen broke their thoughtful silence. Sophia, there's something I need to ask you. She looked up from her plate, noting the serious set of his features. What is it? Our arrangement has worked well these past weeks, he began carefully. But after today's visit, I'm concerned. About Thornton, she asked. About your safety if something happened to me, Owen clarified. Legally, you're my wife, but without certain documentation, you might have difficulty proving your rights to this place if I were no longer here. A cold fear gripped Sophia at the thought. What are you saying? I think we should visit my lawyer in Cedar Springs, Owen explained. I want to make sure the ranch is legally yours as well, that you'd be protected if anything happened. Nothing is going to happen to you, Sophia insisted, unwilling to even consider the possibility. Owen's smile was gentle. I hope not, but a man in my position should plan for all eventualities. Will you come with me to town tomorrow? Sophia agreed, though the conversation left her unsettled. That night, as they prepared for bed, she found herself watching Owen with new awareness, the day's events having forced her to consider what his presence in her life truly meant. When they lay side by side in the darkness, the usual space between them seemed suddenly too wide. Without analyzing her actions, Sophia shifted closer, closing the gap until she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Owen, she whispered. Yes, his voice was low in the darkness. I don't regret it, marrying you, she felt rather than saw him turn his head toward her. I'm glad to hear that, he said softly. It started as an arrangement, Sophia continued, her heart pounding, but it's become more than that, at least for me. Owen was silent for a long moment, and Sophia feared she had said too much. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with her own. For me as well, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. More than I expected, more than I had any right to hope for. Sophia shifted closer still until her head rested against his shoulder. I'm not ready for everything, she whispered, but I don't want to keep pretending this is just a business arrangement when it isn't, not anymore. Owen's arm came around her, drawing her against his side with gentle pressure. We'll take this at whatever pace you need, he promised. There's no hurry. Sophia relaxed into his embrace, feeling a sense of rightness that had been building within her for weeks. As she drifted towards sleep, safe in the circle of Owen's arms, she realized that for the first time since her parents' deaths, she had found a place where she truly belonged. The trip to Cedar Springs the following day took on new meaning after their nighttime conversation. As they traveled, Owen pointed out features of the landscape, sharing stories of his early days on the ranch. Sophia listened with growing affection, seeing how deeply connected he was to this land. In town, their first stop was the office of Mr. Harland, Owen's attorney. The elderly lawyer greeted them warmly, congratulating them on their marriage with genuine pleasure. I'd like to update my will, Owen explained once pleasantries were exchanged, and add Sophia's name to the ranch deed. Mr. Harland nodded, adjusting his spectacles. A wise precaution. Given the circumstances of your marriage, it's particularly important to ensure everything is properly documented. As he prepared the necessary papers, the lawyer asked practical questions about their assets and intentions. Throughout the discussion, Owen included Sophia fully, seeking her input and deferring to her preferences in a way that touched her deeply. "There's one more thing," Owen said as they were concluding their business. "I'd like your advice about a situation." He proceeded to explain about Thornton's continued interest in Sophia and the recent threatening visit. Mr. Harland listened carefully, his expression growing grave. "Legally, Mr. Thornton has no claim whatsoever," the lawyer assured them. "Your marriage is valid and registered with the county. As Mrs. Reynolds, Sophia is under your protection by law." "That's reassuring," Owen said, "but Thornton isn't always concerned with what's legal." Mr. Harland removed his spectacles, polishing them thoughtfully. "Men like Thornton understand one thing above all: power. Right now, he believes he has more of it than you do." "What would you suggest?" Sophia asked. "Create alliances," the lawyer advised. "Become visible, respected members of the community. The more people who know and value you both, the less likely Thornton is to risk his reputation by pursuing a personal vendetta." His gaze settled on Sophia. "That teaching position, for instance, it would establish you as Mrs. Reynolds, respected educator, not just the woman who fled Thornton's household. It makes you harder to vilify and easier to defend." Owen nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "In the meantime," Mr. Harland continued, "document any further interactions with Thornton or his men. If threats escalate, we may need to seek a formal restraining order." After leaving the lawyer's office, they completed their errands in town, including a visit to the school board chairman. Sophia presented her qualifications for the teaching position with quiet confidence, while Owen watched with evident pride. By the time they headed home, Sophia had been all but assured of the position, pending final approval at the next board meeting. The small victory, combined with the legal protections they had put in place, lifted her spirits considerably. "Thank you," she said as they neared the ranch, the sun setting behind them, "for everything today." Owen smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she had come to cherish. "You did the hard part, I just drove the wagon." "You know what I mean," Sophia insisted. "You've given me more than protection, you've given me a future I can shape for myself." Owen's expression softened as he reached for her hand. "You deserve nothing less, Sophia." That night, when they retired to bed, Sophia moved naturally into Owen's arms. As they lay together in the darkness, his embrace protective but not demanding, she felt the last of her reservations begin to dissolve. Turning in his arms, she raised her hand to his face, tracing the contours of his jaw with gentle fingers. Owen remained still, allowing her this exploration, though she could feel his heartbeat quicken beneath her palm when she placed it on his chest. "Owen," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet cabin. "Yes." His response was equally soft, patient. Instead of speaking further, Sophia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as he responded with careful restraint, letting her set the pace of this new intimacy. When they finally parted, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sure about you," Sophia replied simply. "The rest we'll figure out together." His answering smile was visible even in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. That night marked a turning point in their relationship, as what had begun as a marriage of convenience transformed into something deeper, a true partnership founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and growing love. August brought scorching heat, and the promise of Sophia's new position at the Cedar Springs School, set to begin in September. She divided her time between helping Owen with ranch work and preparing lessons for her future students. The school board had been impressed by her knowledge and enthusiasm, confirming her appointment with unanimous approval. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm, marred only by the occasional reminder of Thornton's lingering threat. Twice more his men were spotted near the borders of the ranch, though they made no attempt to approach the cabin. Owen increased his vigilance, but tried not to alarm Sophia unnecessarily. One evening, as they sat on the porch enjoying a rare cool breeze, Owen broached a subject he'd been considering for some time. "The cabin's getting a bit cramped," he observed casually. "I've been thinking we might add a room or two before winter sets in." Sophia looked up from her mending, surprised. "Really? Would that be possible?" Owen nodded, setting aside the piece of wood he'd been carving. "The ranch is doing well this year. I've got timber seasoning in the barn, and Henderson said he'd help with the raising if we decide to go ahead." "What did you have in mind?" Sophia asked, already envisioning the possibilities. "A proper bedroom," Owen suggested, "and maybe a small room that could serve as your study somewhere quiet to prepare your lessons." The thoughtfulness of this proposal touched Sophia deeply. "That sounds wonderful," she said, setting aside her sewing to take his hand. Owen's fingers intertwined with hers, a gesture that had become natural between them. "I want this to be a real home for you, Sophia, not just a place you ended up out of necessity." "It already is a real home," she assured him, leaning against his shoulder, "because you're here." The simple declaration seemed to affect Owen profoundly. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting emotions too complex for words. When he kissed her, Sophia felt the last barriers between them begin to crumble. That night, their lovemaking transcended physical union, becoming an affirmation of the bond that had grown between them, one forged first in crisis, but strengthened through daily acts of care, respect, and growing affection. Afterward, as Sophia lay in the circle of Owen's arms, she felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find when she fled Pico's 3 months earlier. What had begun as a desperate escape had led her to a man whose quiet strength and fundamental decency had captured her heart more thoroughly than any grand passion could have done. "I love you," she whispered against his chest, saying the words aloud for the first time. Owen's arms tightened around her. "And I love you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought possible." The days that followed were among the happiest of Sophia's life. Work began on the addition to the cabin, with the Hendersons and several other neighbors coming to help with the raising of the frame. The sense of community reminded Sophia of barn raisings from her childhood, before her parents' deaths had isolated her in Thornton's household. As September approached, Sophia's excitement about her teaching position grew. The school in Cedar Springs had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 16, and she spent hours organizing lessons appropriate for each level. Owen watched her preparations with evident pride, offering suggestions from his own schooling when asked. The morning of her first day teaching dawned clear and mild, a welcome respite from the August heat. Sophia dressed carefully in a new blue dress she had made specifically for the occasion, her hair neatly arranged in a practical but becoming style. "You look perfect," Owen said as she emerged from behind the dressing screen. "Those children are fortunate to have you as their teacher." Sophia smiled, though butterflies fluttered in her stomach. "I just hope I don't disappoint them or the school board." "Not possible," Owen assured her, helping her into the wagon he had prepared for her journey to town. The 5-mile drive to Cedar Springs gave Sophia time to collect her thoughts and calm her nerves. By the time she arrived at the neat white schoolhouse on the edge of town, she felt ready to face her new responsibility. The day passed in a whirlwind of introductions, assessments, and establishing routines. The children proved eager to learn, if somewhat rambunctious after a summer of freedom. By the time the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, Sophia was exhausted but exhilarated. As promised, Owen was waiting with the wagon when she emerged. "How was it?" he asked as he helped her up to the seat. "Wonderful," Sophia replied, her smile radiant despite her fatigue. "Absolutely wonderful." As they drove home, she described each student, already planning adjustments to her lessons based on what she had observed of their abilities and temperaments. Owen listened attentively, his obvious interest and support strengthening her confidence in this new role. The weeks that followed established a new routine. Sophia taught during weekdays, rising early to help with essential ranch chores before Owen drove her to the schoolhouse. In the evenings and on weekends, she assisted with ranch work while preparing lessons. The addition to the cabin progressed steadily, promising more space before winter arrived. Their happiness was so complete that when it was threatened, the shock was all the more profound. It happened on a crisp October afternoon, as Sophia was walking home from school. Owen had been delayed by a problem with one of the horses, and had sent word that she should start without him. The ranch was only a mile beyond the schoolhouse, an easy walk along a well-traveled road. Sophia had covered about half the distance when a wagon approached from behind. At first she thought nothing of it, stepping aside to let it pass. Then the vehicle slowed alongside her, and a familiar voice sent ice through her veins. "Good afternoon, Miss Valenti, or should I say Mrs. Reynolds?" Elias Thornton sat on the wagon seat, looking prosperous and menacing in his fine coat. Beside him, one of his men handled the reins while another sat in the back of the wagon. Sophia straightened her spine, refusing to show fear. "Mr. Thornton, what brings you to Cedar Springs?" "Business interests," he replied smoothly. "I've been expanding my enterprises. Cedar Springs has potential." The implications of this statement weren't lost on Sophia. If Thornton established himself in Cedar Springs, her sanctuary would be compromised. "I see," she said neutrally. "Well, good day to you." She made to continue walking, but Thornton signaled his driver to keep pace with her. "I must say, you're looking well. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "It does," Sophia replied shortly, quickening her stride. "I wonder if it would interest you to know that I've acquired the mortgage on the Cedar Springs schoolhouse," Thornton continued conversationally. "The town council was quite amenable once I explained my interest in educational improvement." Sophia stopped walking, cold dread settling in her stomach. "What do you want, Mr. Thornton?" His smile was reptilian. "Merely to congratulate a former employee on her success. The children speak highly of their new teacher." The threat was implicit but clear. Her position at the school was now potentially under Thornton's influence. "If you'll excuse me," Sophia said, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart, "my husband is expecting me." "Of course," Thornton nodded. "Give my regards to Reynolds. Tell him I admire a man who knows how to stake his claim." With that parting shot, he signaled his driver to continue, the wagon pulling ahead and leaving Sophia standing in the road, shaken but outwardly composed. She resumed walking, her mind racing. Thornton's appearance in Cedar Springs couldn't be coincidence. He was systematically attempting to undermine the new life she had built first by threatening her teaching position, and who knew what else he planned. When she reached the ranch, Owen was just preparing to leave in search of her. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, dismounting quickly to take her hands in his. Sophia related the encounter, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. When she finished, Owen's expression was grim but unsurprised. "He's escalating," he observed, leading her into the cabin. "I suspected he might when his intimidation tactics didn't work." "What do we do?" Sophia asked, removing her bonnet with hands that trembled only slightly. "If he truly has acquired influence over the school, we fight," Owen said simply. "Not with guns, but with the community we've built here. Thornton may have money, but he doesn't have the trust of the people in Cedar Springs. You do." His confidence bolstered her spirits. "Do you really think that will be enough?" Owen drew her into his arms, his embrace solid and reassuring. "I do, and if it isn't, we'll find another way. What matters is that we face this together." That evening, they discussed their options long into the night. By morning, they had formulated a plan that began with informing Mr. Harland of the latest development and seeking his counsel regarding Thornton's claims about the schoolhouse. The lawyer confirmed that Thornton had indeed purchased the mortgage, but assured them that this gave him no direct control over Sophia's position. "The school board retains full authority over staffing," Mr. Harland explained. However, as the mortgage holder, Thornton could make things difficult by raising the rent or demanding improvements. Armed with this knowledge, Owen and Sophia approached the school board chairman, Mr. Peterson, a retired judge with a reputation for integrity. When they explained the situation, Peterson's reaction was one of controlled anger. Thornton approached the town council without consulting the school board, he confirmed. "It was procedurally correct but ethically questionable. Rest assured, Mrs. Reynolds, your position is secure as long as you wish to continue teaching." This reassurance eased their immediate concerns, but Thornton's interest in Cedar Springs remained troubling. Over the following weeks, rumors circulated that he was purchasing property in town, including the building that housed the general store where Owen and Sophia did much of their trading. "He's trying to isolate us," Owen observed as November arrived with its shorter days and cooler temperatures. "Cut off our support in the community by controlling where people work and shop." "It won't work," Sophia insisted, her determination hardened by months of building relationships in Cedar Springs. "People here know us now. They won't be easily turned against us." Her confidence proved well-founded. When Thornton raised the rent on the general store, forcing Mrs. Winters to increase her prices, the townsfolk organized to purchase their supplies collectively, maintaining their loyalty to the shop that had served them fairly for years. When rumors began circulating about Sophia's questionable past, in Picos clearly planted by Thornton's associates, the parents of her students rallied to her defense, calling a special meeting to express their support for the teacher who had transformed their children's education. Thornton's attempts to undermine their standing in Cedar Springs had the opposite effect, strengthening the community's bonds and cementing Owen and Sophia's place within it. By December, with the addition to their cabin completed and the first snows dusting the Texas hills, Thornton's campaign of harassment seemed to be losing momentum. There had been no further direct confrontations, and his business interests in Cedar Springs appeared to be managed remotely rather than through personal visits. "Do you think he's given up?" Sophia asked one evening as they sat by the fire in their expanded home, the new bedroom and study providing welcome space as winter settled in. Owen considered the question carefully before answering. "Not entirely. Men like Thornton don't surrender easily. But I think he's reassessing his approach." "What do you mean?" Sophia pressed, setting aside her book. "I've been hearing rumors," Owen admitted. "Thornton's been expanding aggressively not just here but in other towns as well. There's talk that he's overextended himself financially." This was interesting news. "You think his vendetta against us might be taking a back seat to business concerns?" "It's possible," Owen nodded. "Personal grudges are expensive luxuries when capital is tight." The prospect of Thornton's financial difficulties potentially freeing them from his shadow was cautiously encouraging. As Christmas approached, Sophia allowed herself to hope that perhaps the worst was behind them. The holiday season brought a festive atmosphere to their home. Sophia decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, while Owen surprised her with a small pine tree which they adorned with paper ornaments and candles. On Christmas Eve, they exchanged modest gifts: a new scarf Sophia had knitted for Owen, and a beautiful leather-bound journal he had ordered from San Antonio for her. "There's one more thing," Owen said as they sat before the fire, content in each other's company. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Sophia opened it to find a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Owen," she breathed, "it's beautiful, but we're already married." "I know," he said, taking the ring and sliding it onto her finger alongside her plain gold wedding band. "But that first ceremony was rushed, born of necessity rather than choice. I wanted you to have something that represents what our marriage has become, something chosen freely, with love." Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she looked from the ring to her husband's face. "I love you, Owen Reynolds. And I love you, Sophia Reynolds," he replied, drawing her into his arms, "more than I have words to express." That night, as snow fell softly outside their window, they reaffirmed their commitment to each other in the most intimate way, their union now as complete in love as it was in law. January of 1876 arrived with bitter cold, and the news that Elias Thornton had indeed overextended his financial resources. The bank in Picos was rumored to be calling in loans, and several of Thornton's business ventures in neighboring towns had been sold to satisfy creditors. "It couldn't happen to a more deserving man," Owen remarked when they heard the news at the general store. Mrs. Winters, who had suffered under Thornton's increased rent, nodded in agreement. "They say he's selling properties left and right, including, thankfully, this building." My herald was able to purchase it outright last week, with help from a few investors in town. This was welcome news, suggesting that Thornton's influence in Cedar Springs was waning. However, Sophia remained cautious. Financial troubles might make him more desperate, not less dangerous, she pointed out as they drove home. Owen acknowledged this possibility. We'll stay vigilant, he promised, but I think the tide is turning in our favor. His optimism proved justified in the weeks that followed. One by one, Thornton's holdings in Cedar Springs were sold to local businessmen, often at prices below market value due to his pressing need for capital. By February, his presence in the town was reduced to a single property, the mortgage on the schoolhouse, which the town council was actively negotiating to repurchase. Winter gradually yielded to early spring, with March bringing the first wildflowers to the Texas hills. On a mild Saturday, as Owen and Sophia worked in the vegetable garden they had planned together, the sound of an approaching rider drew their attention. Sheriff Jenkins from Pecos sat uncomfortably atop his horse, looking older and more careworn than when they had last encountered him almost a year earlier. Owen straightened, placing himself slightly in front of Sophia as the sheriff dismounted. "Reynolds," Jenkins acknowledged with a nod. "Mrs. Reynolds, Sheriff," Owen replied cautiously. "What brings you to our ranch?" Jenkins removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture that suggested he was uncomfortable with his errand. "I come with news," he said finally. "Thought you ought to hear it directly, given your history with the man." "What news?" Sophia asked, stepping forward to stand beside Owen, her hand finding his. "Elias Thornton is dead," Jenkins stated flatly. "Found in his office 2 days ago. Doctor says it was his heart." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Sophia felt a complex rush of emotions, relief predominant among them, but also a strange, unexpected sadness for a life that had ultimately been reduced to pursuit of wealth and power at the expense of human connection. "I'm sorry to hear that," Owen said formally. Though his grip on Sophia's hand tightened perceptibly, Jenkins nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the measured response. "There's more you should know. His financial affairs were in considerable disarray. The bank's foreclosing on most of his properties, including the main house in Pecos. That's unfortunate for those who depended on him for employment," Sophia observed, thinking of the household staff who had been her companions for 6 years. "Indeed," Jenkins agreed. "But that brings me to the other reason for my visit." He reached into his coat and withdrew an official-looking envelope. "This was among Thornton's papers. It's addressed to you, Mrs. Reynolds." Sophia accepted the envelope with wary curiosity. Her married name, was written on the front in Thornton's distinctive hand. Breaking the seal, she unfolded the single sheet it contained and read it quickly, her expression changing from wariness to astonishment. "What is it?" Owen asked, concern evident in his voice. "It's a deed," Sophia explained, still processing the contents, "to a small property outside Pecos. Apparently it belonged to my parents before their deaths. Thornton purchased it from their creditors but never developed it." She looked up at Jenkins in confusion. "Why would he leave this to me?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't say for certain, but there was a note with it, a personal one that might explain." He produced a second, smaller envelope. Sophia opened this one with even greater trepidation, reading the brief message inside with growing bewilderment. "What does it say?" Owen asked when she remained silent. "It says, 'Sophia, your parents entrusted you to my care. I failed in that trust through selfishness and pride. This property rightfully belongs to you. Consider it restitution, however inadequate. E.T.' Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's unexpected." "Yes," Sophia agreed, folding the note carefully. "It seems even Elias Thornton was capable of recognizing his mistakes at the end." Jenkins replaced his hat, clearly relieved to have completed his errand. "The deed has been properly registered. The property is legally yours, free and clear." He hesitated before adding, "For what it's worth, I believe he regretted his actions toward you. In his final weeks, he spoke often of making amends for past wrongs." After the sheriff departed, Owen and Sophia sat on their porch, discussing this unexpected development and what it might mean for their future. "We could sell the property," Owen suggested. Use the proceeds to expand the ranch if you wanted. Sophia considered this, turning the deed over in her hands. Perhaps, or we could see what condition it's in. It might be something we could use someday or pass on to our children. Owen's expression softened at her casual mention of children, a subject they had discussed, but not yet actively pursued. Our children, he repeated, drawing her close. I like the sound of that. Sophia leaned into his embrace, marveling at how completely her life had transformed in the span of a year. From desperate flight to genuine love, from isolation to community, from powerlessness to independence, the journey had been remarkable. What are you thinking? Owen asked, noting her thoughtful expression. I'm thinking about that day on the road, Sophia replied, when you blocked their path and claimed me as your wife. You saved me then, but I had no idea you were also leading me to everything I never knew I wanted. Owen's arms tightened around her. You saved me too, you know. This place was just land and buildings before you came. You made it a home. As the spring sun warmed their faces, and the scent of wildflowers drifted on the breeze, Sophia Reynolds felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unlikely series of events that had led her to this moment, and to this man who had become the center of her world. 1 year later, in April of 1877, Sophia stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching as Owen showed their 3-month-old son the first bluebonnets of spring. James Daniel Reynolds, named for both their fathers, gurgled happily in his father's strong arms, tiny hands reaching for the bright blue flowers. The past year had brought many changes. They had visited the property outside Pico's, finding it to be a small but fertile tract of land with a modest cabin. Rather than selling it, they had decided to hold on to it, perhaps as a legacy for James or any siblings who might follow. Sophia continued teaching, bringing James with her to school until one of the older girls could watch him during lessons. The arrangement worked well, allowing her to balance motherhood with her vocation. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, with Owen adding cattle to their ventures and Sophia maintaining meticulous records of their finances. They had recently hired a young man to help with the heavier work, allowing Owen more time with his growing family. As she watched her husband and son in the spring sunshine, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. From the desperate woman fleeing Thornton's control to the confident wife, mother, and teacher, she had become the transformation seemed almost miraculous. When Owen looked up and caught her watching, his smile illuminated his entire face. He whispered something to James, then carried the baby back toward the cabin. What were you telling him? Sophia asked as they reached the porch. Owen gently transferred their son to her waiting arms. I was telling him how lucky we are, he replied, and how it all began with a desperate ride and a chance meeting on a dusty road. The day you claimed me as your wife, Sophia recalled, smiling at the memory that had once been frightening but now seemed like the first chapter of their love story. The best decision I ever made, Owen confirmed, drawing both her and James into his embrace. Even if I had to bend the truth a little at the time. Sophia laughed softly. Sometimes the best truths start as necessary fictions. As they stood together on the porch of the home they had built both physically and emotionally, the Texas sun warming their faces and their child secure between them, Sophia knew that what had begun as a desperate gambit had transformed into the most profound truth of her life. She was Owen Reynolds' wife, by choice and by love, now and always. The road that had once seemed to lead only to escape had instead brought her home.